I'm going for the Guinness Book of Records on two accounts here. One is the longest title for a BALEAP presentation, and the second is the most number of slides in one presentation. And I've got a lot of role models from the Pechakuchu speakers the other night, some of whom are here, so I'm going at your speed. I'm talking today about a MOOC at the University of Reading, which I am totally parasitic upon. It was produced by my wonderful colleagues in our International Study and Language Centre, Anne Vickery, Steve Thomas and Seb Watkins. They are not here, I am, so I can say whatever I like. I'm also representing a colleague in my department, Clare Wright, and Liz Wilding, who is working in ISLI. So this is something that we've worked on together. But as I say, I did not do the hard work. I just did the study of the hard work. And what I'm going to talk about today is a little bit about background to the study that we did. We're talking about the experiences of the educator designers, the textbook writers, if you will, in more traditional context. Also talking about the experiences of the mentors, who are sort of halfway between being more experienced peers and teachers. They're not EAP teachers, all of them, but they were acting as such within this environment. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the reflections that everybody had on that experience. And if you find it as riveting as I do, but can't keep up, there is a publication coming out that will be, is on the set of references at the end, which will be available on the website afterwards. So, another good way to make sure that you get accepted by a conference is to refer to the conference theme. So I'm doing that. And EAP in a rapidly changing landscape, issues, challenges and solutions. My argument is that an EAP MOOC has them all. So I knew they would accept this paper. I knew I was in with a good chance. And guess what? It did. So that's just a little tip to you all. If you're putting in a conference paper, do try and get the conference themes in there. So what is a MOOC? Massive open online course, and they are massive. That's the scary thing. Started in the States, as all good things do, in 2008. You are here, Catherine, aren't you? Yes, 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 yes. But actually, the invasion of the MOOCs, as it has been called, started really in 2012, when some of the really top universities in the States got involved with providers Udacity, Coursera and edX taking up the reins at that point. Different types of MOOCs, I shall keep pressing it, yes, have been sort of identified, because, you know, we have to do that in applied linguistics or education. So you've got an XMOOC, not quite as exciting as it might sound, which is focused very much on content and transmission, a very traditional way of teaching, actually. Come online, we will tell you everything you need to know about sub-Saharan malarial diseases, for example. Okay, and that's an XMOOC. The other kind is called a CMOOC, which is much more what we do. It's a sort of a collaborative, constructivist, participatory view of learning. And you could argue that that's going to be hard to do in an environment where you've got thousands of students or hundreds of thousands of students. So those are two clearly defined and very different types of MOOC. And Lisa Lane, in her blog in 2012, sort of worked with those definitions and came up with three types of MOOCs. Network-based, which is really this one, people working together, participating together. Task-based, which is where I think we come in, which was her new addition to the categorization. And content-based, which was much more like the XMOOC. There's other ways of defining them, but those are the ones that the literature has picked up on most. And of course, you can get hybrid versions of these. And there's an amazing man in America called Bonk, who has come up with 22 different types of MOOC, but I didn't feel I could, despite getting in the name mentioned, Bonk 2013, I remember that, 22 different types. So what people are saying about the kind of people who teach on MOOCs, sorry, you're going to have to follow me while I come up to here, is that MOOC teachers we all know that anybody doing any kind of teaching has multiple roles. Yes, EAP, we do these things, but this is the scary bit. High reputational risk, potentially. And that's one of the things that certainly worried my colleagues at Reading when they were setting this up, and it's one of the things that I will return to later on. The background to our MOOC It's available, it's on FutureLearn. I was going to click and show it to you, but I suspect that might take too long, and then we'd get so excited and gripped by the content that we wouldn't go any further. So just to let you know that it's been established by FutureLearn, which was Britain getting on the MOOC bandwagon, 2013, set up by, does anybody know who set up FutureLearn? Open University, a private organisation growing out of the Open University. Originally 23 plus British universities, but increasingly universities around the world, Europe, Australia and beyond, the British Library, the British Council, the British Museum. And within a year it had 133 courses ranging from things like obesity to warfare in the 21st century. You might think of obesity as being a C-MOOC, I'm not sure, but certainly warfare in the 21st century you would hope was an X-MOOC. Anyway, ours was our second MOOC at Reading. The first one was in systems engineering on designing an app, so a little different. Aimed at IELTS 4.5, so pre-summer, pre-sessional, so very, very pre. And it was developed, as I said, by my 3 colleagues that I mentioned earlier who work in our fabulous International Study and Language Institute, ISLI. And what was interesting about it, amongst other things, is that it was actually based on a print-based textbook that had not been used. It had sat on somebody's shelf for quite a long time and had not been used, so we'll come back to that. 5 weeks long. The idea is that people will work for 3 hours a week. So you've got 15 hours is what you're looking at to try and improve writing. Beginner level writing course for people with IELTS 4.5 who want to study in English. We had 18,000 students enrolled. Just to set that in context, we have 17,000 students at Reading. So it can't have just been them. There must have been a few other people as well. And of course the thing with MOOCs is that the drop-off is huge, but we still had 2,500 at the end, active in the last week. We don't really know who they are or who they were. We don't know which of them were the ones who'd started out with 4.5, who they were, but they were still with us at the end. From about 100 countries, mostly female and mostly under 35, so that's a bit of demographic. And they were building up in that 5 weeks to a peer-reviewed final essay of 350 words. That was the idea, peer-reviewed. Has to be peer-reviewed because there's so many of them, there's no way we can do it. So we were very worried about that whole aspect, because we hadn't done anything like that before, but I'll tell you how it went later on. Okay, the teachers, as I said, our educator designers were experienced EAP teachers, very well qualified. They wrote the materials, and in fact, as I said, it was an unpublished paper-based course on grammar for writing that had been around for a while and not used. And this seemed like a good opportunity to bring it out from the cobwebs. We had 4 part-time mentors who were online every day, but only for an hour and a half, 2 hours a day, not very much. And they had a background in language. They were students, our students, former students, from a whole range of disciplines, but all with languages in there. So we had a foreign language major, we had somebody who had done an MA in applied linguistics, an MRes, sorry, PhD student, graduate, and a BA English language and MA applied linguistics graduate. But they were not qualified teachers per se. Well, one of them was, but they weren't all qualified teachers. But they had all done a lot of academic writing within living memory. Okay, and what we did was we had semi-structured interviews with each of the participants. The comments are in purple from the educator designers. The colour is no indication of the kind of things they talked about. And the mentors' comments are in blue. Similarly, the colour reflects nothing beyond the differentiation. And they talked about the efficiency of it as well as their roles within the programme and what they had done. Starting first with the educator designers, their motivation for being involved was to find out about online learning. What was involved? What was it going to be like? But they were very much designing in the dark. They felt very, very uncomfortable at the beginning. The only training they had was lurking on other people's MOOCs. And that's the hint I would give you if you're going to do a MOOC, just go and lurk. Lurk on ours. You know, have a good lurk. There's nothing like a good lurk. Because there is no training. This is new. Nobody really knew exactly how it was going to go or what would be involved. And by lurking on other courses, they knew what they liked. They were experienced teachers. They knew what they liked. They knew what they didn't like. And what they didn't like was lots of talking heads, for example. So they knew they had to have variety, varied pace, input, and the activities had to be as varied as they could be. And they drew on their experiences as EAP teachers and materials writers, which everybody in this room would also have. There was a major problem This is being recorded, so I'll probably never work again. Limited functionality. The Future Learn platform. Have any of you done any Future Learn programs? It's very limited functionality, very limited. Our teachers thought they were going to be able to do lovely drag and drop exercises, gap fill exercises, all sorts of wonderful delights. No, multiple choice and discussion boards. The functionality was extremely limited, and they really did feel the tail was wagging the dog. What they felt was all the time they were having to water down their tasks. And that's not unique to Future Learn, but it is an issue in this kind of an environment. They felt that they were trying to do something that the platform wasn't ready for. They were trying to build in skills development, to do task-based work, to do a more constructivist approach, when actually MOOCs are intended much more for giving content. They're more comfortable being X than C, if you will. And they felt that EAP, MOOCs weren't quite ready really for EAP, but they did it. And we're not alone in those concerns and those issues. What you do is you design your activities, and then you find out what the platform will let you do, and you have to revise them all. So there was a lot of backwards and forwards with the technology department saying, no, you can't do that, you can't do that. So their concerns were this: their faces, their names, our university, all over it. 20,000 people, 18,000 people. You know, this is a lot of people to piss off. And so if it was going to be rubbish, and it wouldn't be their fault, because they'd designed it to be, you know, all bells, all whistles, but they weren't even allowed. Well, there was no bell at all, maybe one bell, and certainly no whistles. So, you know, they had no right of veto. They really felt highly exposed, especially at the beginning. And there has been some major criticisms of some of the other MOOCs elsewhere. And if students don't like it, you hear, because there's lots of places they can post what they think online. So it was a case of light touch paper and stand back and breathe quietly and hope everything will be all right. They were also shocked by how long it took. Actually, they weren't. They work in a university, they know. When you're asked to do something extra, it won't take very long, just on top of your normal day job. You know, it took a lot longer. They were horrified by the students' level, because, no, there were people like you. There were people enrolling their whole course on it. Their master's students were doing it. Teachers around the world were doing it. Of course, lurking, trying to get good ideas. I would recommend it. It's an excellent thing to do. But when they realised that, and this came out very early in the first week, they realised they had native English speaker EAP teachers, people with master's degrees and PhDs and things like that. So hugely concerned about this mix. And they wanted to follow a processed genre view of writing, because that's what we believe, but how do you do that in a MOOC? So those were some of the issues. And I love this quote from my colleague. You know, this is what they saw unfolding. But the feedback was extraordinary. We could not believe it. I don't know whether they managed to find the negative people and kill them off. I don't know, but whatever it was, you know, they either all just sort of gave up and went away quietly, but people don't tend to do that in the online environment. The comments were extraordinarily positive. There was this amazing feel-good factor. Why? Actually, I think one of the problems with the platform was also a strength. It was all very familiar very quickly. Once you know you're only going to get discussion boards and multiple choice questions and the odd thing for you to do, as well as this very good input, you can relax. From a student's point of view, there wasn't an awful lot to get their teeth into that was sort of pedagogically challenging in any way. It was clear and it was uniform. And everybody was clear about what the aims were, We knew what we wanted them to do at the beginning, at the end, that they couldn't do at the beginning. And that was made explicit all the way through. Great clarity for the students and for the staff. And it's interesting that some researchers, other people talking about this, have said actually good MOOCs can do the same as textbooks. Thank you. They can give quality, they can give interactive content. And they can also have lecturing, leadership by the professors, which can lend structure and authority. This is by Krause, writing about MOOCs last year. And that's exactly what we had on our MOOC. We had experienced teachers and a textbook. And it led to a highly successful MOOC, taking a textbook and transforming it, plus some very motivated learners. We were capturing people at the right time. These students were thanking us. I don't know how often you get thanked at the end of a class by students going, this was happening all the time. People putting up messages, fantastic, thank you so much. The teachers were absolutely amazed by it. Now, it could be just because the people were desperate to communicate, I don't know, but whatever it was, they communicated their satisfaction. The mentors, again, no prior experience, no prior training. They were initially completely overwhelmed by the volume of what was going on. The discussion boards, you've got 18,000 students initially, and you're online for an hour a day for 5 weeks, supposedly, and you would just pop in and pop out, pop in and pop out. It wasn't like Facebook. You couldn't go in and follow people in quite that way or chase them or find out or search. They couldn't track responses. They couldn't even see if their responses had been read if somebody didn't respond. You could follow people, but if you weren't following somebody, you would never necessarily see or hear from them again. And they could choose to follow you. Students could follow the mentors or the educators. Interesting, they chose to follow the educators, not the mentors. That's just like the student in class who wants the attention of the teacher. Quite extraordinary. Again, it was highly time-consuming, and they encountered really varied levels of English, as well as varied levels of academic writing. I like to think that the native speaker English EAP teachers had both, but you never know. Had high levels of both. Okay, so very challenging situation. And they saw themselves as being halfway houses, not teachers quite, not students quite, but in the middle. And they really did experience this distinction between being a sage on the stage or a guide by the side that's been talked about in terms of online learning since the beginning. But this is what they found extraordinary. The engagement. This is of the people that chose to continue, that chose to remain engaged. But there were a lot of them. But their feedback was a drop in the ocean. They were very conscious of that. In an hour, you could respond to maybe 3 or 10 participants out of the thousands that are out there. Yeah, I think that's probably an understatement. I don't think there was a huge amount of teaching going on, actually. A lot of it was just keeping people going, being supportive. But they were trying to teach, bless them. And this distinction between being friendly and not being too strict, but also looking professional, looking like you were being a mentor. And would you let inaccurate language go? What would you do about that? And do you go for quality or quantity? Trying to get the language right, trying to help them urge out the answer. Trying to give information, trying to answer questions, but only the ones they saw. A lot just passed them by. They would try to pick on topics that were generalizable, so if somebody else read the response, it might apply to what they were doing as well, but they would give it a name. So they would say, you make some really good, interesting points in your introduction, Jose. So hoping that Jose would see, but other people would find the comments to Jose useful. There was a lot of peer mentoring going on. Those wonderful English language teachers out there who'd enrolled with their students, they actually got involved and were saying, good on you, Jose. That's really a great introduction, and the conclusion's not bad either. And there was mentoring and correcting going on. You can't take teachers out of teaching, can you, even online? But some of the peer feedback was a little weaker than others, and they would correct that if they saw it. But of course, they didn't see it all. So there was probably some very dodgy stuff going on as well. But that's the nature of the beast when you let people talk to each other. They also were delighted by that final feedback. They felt that the work was better. Whether it's just because all the really weak ones had dropped off, I don't know. But anyway, the EAP teachers who continued to the end, they had really good full sentences and better grammar. And the fact is we just don't know. We don't know who had started and who had finished. We don't know who was 4.5. There's no entrance test. Anyone can self-enroll. We just don't know how many had stayed the course. But one of the teachers felt that there were people there who continued to the end who were at the right level. And they did seem to have learned and improved. But, you know, that's not going to I wouldn't want to publish that in a journal as a sort of definitive evidence. It's not going to convince particularly. So what should a mentor be? They need to be all of these things. I think they do need some understanding and experience of academic writing. They need to have done it within living memory, but it helps if they're not too far from the living memory of having done it, so that they understand and they empathise with the participants. It's very useful if they know something about teaching. Certainly, I think we needed to do more work with them on how to give feedback. And it's useful if they know about SLA, but one of them did point out that the danger is if you know about language, you might be tempted to start throwing in meta language, particularly if you're in a rush and you've got, you know, another 5,000 people to respond to in the next 10 minutes. So, and the non-native speaker, English speaker, said actually it was quite useful. Her background was German, and she found she could really pick up and help the German writers in the group. But of course, you know, you're not going to cover all bases in terms of L1. They definitely needed more training. They needed to know how to use the platform, Future Learn. There was no guidance given. They needed that. They also needed training in feedback, and we can certainly now do that with comments that they have produced, which we can share with other mentors as we go ahead. They needed more collaboration amongst themselves. They tended to be working independently and did not mix and discuss things enough, and I think that's quite important. You need a self-help group, really, for mentors, so that they can cope with the shock of just the sheer volume of it all and the pace and speed of it all. So our MOOC was a hybrid. We did have content. We talked about grammar. We talked about academic writing style. We talked about what an essay should or could look like. But there was also lots of participatory e-literacy and collaborative learning going on. They had to. They gave each other feedback on their assignments. And if you gave feedback on an assignment, somebody gave feedback on yours. And the more people you gave feedback to, the more people gave you feedback. Computers can let you do that. That worked well. So, yes, it was network-based, but we had a relatively unsophisticated communications platform in Future Learn, and Future Learn's not alone in that. Yes, it was task-based, but how do you organise and give feedback on tasks when you've got thousands of students and not very many staff looking at their work? It was content-based, but how do you get the right content for the learners, unknown learners? 4.5 was a good level to go for, because we knew they didn't know a lot, so that was helpful. Because neither did we at that point. The designers, yes, they were looking at it top-down, responsible for content and organisation. The mentors were much more bottom-up, process-focused with their feedback work. And the reasons for the success were because it was a simple structure, very clear. We had C-based pedagogic values, we wanted collaboration, we wanted participation, but it was skills-based and there was content. They were learning about the grammar, they were learning about writing an essay. Even some of the native speakers said, gosh, I didn't know that about introductions. It's a worry, isn't it? But Maxine, it's not a worry. We know lots of native speaker students don't know about these things to do with academic writings. So it was a model of where C meets X. I feel like it could be a title for a film, you know, where C meets X. Anyway. And seemed to me these are the issues. When you've got complex and challenging skills, which is very much the case with academic writing, it really does help to have a very specific and limited focus, because then everybody knows what they're doing. It's clear what's happening. Our lot all started out in the dark, totally. They didn't know where they were going or what they were going to be doing, but we didn't tell the students that. But clear objectives and straightforward content is really important, and it allowed you to have a path through the materials that the learners were very clear about. Remember, 5 weeks, 3 hours a week, they didn't have to make a lot of choices. It was very clear what the path through the course would be. And they were working on their own and with each other, but also with some prompting from those MOOC guides by their side. So, there we are, back to the conference theme. This should guarantee I get to come back here next year. Is there anybody here from the selection committee? Okay. So yes, it is a hugely changing landscape. There are lots of issues and challenges, and there were some solutions, but there's no doubt to me that an EAP MOOC covers everything that this conference is about. And that is the end, you'll be pleased to hear, because it's very hot in here. Thank you for listening. Are there any questions? Have we got any time for questions? With a bit of luck, we haven't.